Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining this session on Developer Experience 2.0. I'm going to get a timer running here. And I think we have about 20 minutes or so. The first half of this presentation is a summary of a presentation that has already been given in case somebody has seen this and this looks very familiar. I just want to explain. I'm rerunning something here that was given at the European Mini Summit in June and at the TWS in July. So first half is a summary of that. Second half is new material based on work since then. In the slides, a couple of things that are marked with this next cube here are work in progress, and everything that does not have that next cube on it is things that are used today in one or the other OpenDaylight project that is ready for you to use as well. Some points are marked with hashtag help wanted. A couple of things here that we would be happy for any of you to jump on and contribute to if you were so inclined. I'm going to talk fast because I want to cover 4 things in these 25 minutes that we have. First one is Eclipse setup. So introduction to a basically workspace provisioning tool. Just walk you through what that is and how you can use it. Second topic is about code quality, static code analysis, and a couple of experiences from having done that on a number of projects now. Third topic is on local builds and how to deploy locally and give a few tips around that. And the fourth topic is on end-to-end API tests, going into dependency injection and how to swap services for tests. I won't have time to cover that fourth topic fully, but that will lead into another session that I'm giving tomorrow from 3 to 4 on the fourth topic. So if you're interested in that in particular, we'll touch upon that very briefly at the end and then continue that tomorrow. All right. Eclipse setup, first topic, based on the Oomph Eclipse installer. If you're a new developer who would like to work on the OpenDaylight code base and you perhaps have some development background, Java experience, or perhaps some more C experience, as is common in some OpenDaylight developers, you might find the setup to get a development environment to contribute to OpenDaylight non-trivial. You have a couple of things you have to do. You need to figure out this Garrett stuff, and then you have tools that you can run in your workspace to check your code and check style stuff, and then there's certain preferences that you need to set in a certain way. There's always Maven set up, so you need to have this particular settings XML and configure your local Maven. It shouldn't be that hard, right? If you are an occasional contributor, somebody who wants to perhaps fix a bug in something that you found in your use of OpenDaylight, and you say, oh, I'd really like to contribute to this upstream, it should be really easy for you to do that. One of the purposes of an open community is that you should be able to just get started with the code easily. I have given this some thought. This has been a few months ago already, earlier this year, and come up with a solution for this, which is, meanwhile, I think fairly widely used. It's sort of hard with these things sometimes to know exactly who's using it, but based on some feedback I got and just people walking up and saying, I'm actually using this, thanks for doing this, it seems that a number of people have now adopted using this. What I've done is that for the Eclipse integrated development environment, there is a tool called the Eclipse installer, which has become, last summer or so, a year ago, the standard way of distributing Eclipse. So a little earlier, when you went to eclipse.org and downloaded Eclipse and you got a big zip file, that's changed about a year or so ago, a year and a half ago. And now you get a small Eclipse installer, which is a setup tool that's been downloaded millions of times. Everybody who uses Eclipse uses this setup tool. And what that does is, it's a small couple of 100K installer file. You start that up, and then it says, what do you want to do with Eclipse? You Java developer, you PHP developer, do you want to write domain-specific languages? Do you want to work on JavaScript? And then you sort of pick your flavor, and then it starts downloading your right plugins and setting everything up. This is standard Eclipse. What we've done for OpenDaylight is we have integrated OpenDaylight into this. So if you go to eclipse.org/download and get the Eclipse standard installer today, you can then click a button and provision all of the OpenDaylight projects into your local workspace directly from eclipse.org, which is pretty cool, actually. So millions of developers who download the Eclipse development environment are actually one click away from contributing to OpenDaylight and a number of other open source projects. They have this catalog of projects that you can choose and provision from. And we got OpenDaylight in there. The way this works in detail is best explained in a 10-minute demo, which I simply don't have the time to do in these 25 minutes. There's a video on YouTube that walks through step by step. Very easy to find. You look for OpenDaylight Eclipse setup or something like that on YouTube comes up as the first hit. And I walk you through step by step what you do. Basically, you download this installer. There's one thing which people miss. You have to right-click in the upper right-hand corner here and enable the catalog, because by default, they don't show the thousands of projects that they support. So you right-click in the upper right-hand corner. You get this screen here where you can check controller or docs or deluxe or whatever you want to contribute to. And you say finish, and you more or less get a ready workspace that has no ready in it. There's a few hoops in it. It's all documented in a README file on this GitHub repository. So the source code for this setup is actually an open source script itself, Vorburger / OpenDaylight Eclipse setup. And what the Eclipse installer does, it just points to this. So there's what's called a setup model in this that says here are the repositories of the 80 or so OpenDaylight projects. Here are the preferences that have to be set. Here is how check style has to be configured, yada, yada, yada. There's like a lot of things it does to provision a workspace. And the README here explains how to do it, and the video on YouTube walks through how to do it. The video has been seen about 1,000 times, which is not so bad for sort of a technical video for something that I think shows that there is interest in the OpenDaylight community for developer tooling. 1,000 views of this video in about, what's it been, 5 months or so. But that's pretty cool, actually. I walked through very briefly what the setup tool does in some level of detail. So you check a number of projects. You say, I want to work on Deluxe, a controller, or Netvert, or basically choose the projects you want to contribute to. It then goes ahead and does a git clone. It imports the projects that it cloned into the workspace. It sets up dynamic working sets. So this is a way in Eclipse to keep Netvert and controller in sort of separate folders in the workspace. It does some magic, which isn't really magic, but it does some configurations of the Maven Eclipse integration to make sure that that works smooth. So that starts with actually configuring that settings XML for you. So you don't have to do that. That just works out of the box. And it goes a little further. It tunes a number of Eclipse settings to make sure that that works smoothly. It then integrates 20 or so external plugins. So non-Eclipse.org plugins that are useful for working on OpenDaylight. That are things like the checkstyle ID integration, findbox ID integration. That are things like the Yang editor over here, which is obviously an OpenDaylight project. It also does preferences, 20 or 30 preferences that are just setting the Eclipse code formatter to match the conventions we have in OpenDaylight, or does some stuff for line ending and line length and all that kind of things. If you want to know exactly what it does, you can look at the project in GitHub, and it's basically the setup model that configures this all. This is a screenshot of the perhaps most prominent and most useful Eclipse plugin that's part of the Eclipse setup, the Yang ID tool that David Carr here would know all about, that you just get as part of this setup to make it easy for you to work on OpenDaylight code, which of course has a lot of Yang model files. There's a couple of general Eclipse tips that I like to give at this point for anybody who's using this Eclipse setup to work on OpenDaylight. There have been a few questions on the mailing list saying something or the other doesn't work, and it turned out that people disabled the auto build. That's something I wouldn't do. I personally never do it. I know there is a theory out there that Eclipse is slow in building, and so you try to be smarter than your tool and you switch off the auto build and then you switch it back on when you need it to build. But I wouldn't do that. That only creates hassle, and you just let it do its thing and build when it has to and keep the auto build on.
That, I will say I've run into problems where, since we used to put the target, Eclipse used to have a different target directory, so it conflict with Maven, right? So, but I found when I do a Maven, actually do your queue thing and clean
there are some problems.
With Eclipse running, it'll actually try to recompile and get a corrupted.
Yes, that's true. That's true, Tom. If you were
that's where I turn off that.
Right.
And then remember to turn it.
Right. Yes, there can be conflicts between if you run Maven on the command line and if you run Eclipse or the Maven support in Eclipse, that it steps on each other's toes, basically, is what Tom is saying. One thing we should perhaps talk about there is to see if we could do, I've done this in another project actually in a past life. I've done something where the Maven parent POM is configured to put the target directory when running under Eclipse somewhere else. So you really keep it completely separate. There's really no reason to share this.
We
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Okay. Was there any reason why we got rid of it?
Somebody removed it at some point.
Yeah.
They used to, if you were running an Eclipse, the Maven file would say, okay, target dash.
Yeah, I think we should look at bringing that back. Perhaps the reason at the time was that the IDE integration wasn't as advanced as it is now. Right now, with some of the what's called M2 Eclipse extensions that I've integrated in the setup model, everything that you need to run in the IDE runs in the IDE. So there's really no reason to rely on the command line build for the code in the IDE. So I think bringing that separation back would solve the problem you're alluding to, and perhaps be a good thing.
I'll have to find out why it was taken out.
Yeah. If we could have a chat about that afterwards, I'd love to look at that and see what we can do bringing that back. Another thing on sort of general Eclipse tips, I personally don't do separate workspaces. So there's people who keep a couple of different Git repositories and different matching Eclipse workspaces per branch or something, stable boron and master, and don't do that. Just single workspace, everything together, and have switch branches in there. That works great for me. What you can do sometimes if you tend to work on different parts of the open source OpenDaylight community, if you're contributing to controller one day and network another day, you can close projects, and these dynamic working sets help with that. So you can, with these dynamic working sets that present everything that's in one repository in one place, you can close them, and then the day after when you work on something else, or an hour after, reopen projects. Do things like that. To me, it's easier than having separate workspaces. Question, David?
Another strategy for that is Myelin, using tasks.
You can use Myelin with tasks.
With one task, you can essentially just see a subset of the project,
Yeah.
and change task, and you see a different set of projects.
That solves the problem on visibility. What you also run into is, especially if you work on lower level kernel projects, you can run into sort of big rebuilds. If you keep everything open and you work on Yang tools and you switch a branch in Yang tool, the Eclipse Maven support will say, oh, you changed something in Yang tools, I have to start recompiling everything else you have open. So for that, sometimes you're faster if you close things. If you have any red, the one thing you want to do in a Maven-based project is not just project clean, but you want to do Alt F5, which is the Maven clean. That sets the Maven configuration, resets the Maven configuration, and does more than just the classic project clean, which you shouldn't have to do very often, but if you have, that's the thing to do. Any questions about this, discussions about this? We have agreed that on the dev list with the prefix Eclipse in square brackets on the subject, we could have such discussions. Okay, I want to hurry up a little bit. A couple of other things that are in this Eclipse setup tool, so third-party plugins other than the Yang editor specific to OpenDaylight. There's a couple of non-OpenDaylight generic things. There's eGit and eGarret for working with Garrett. There's some Docker and Vagrant tooling, find bugs. There's a couple of screenshots here. So this is trivial, just to show that you really don't need the command line to work with Git in the Eclipse OpenDaylight setup. The eGit support is very, very good. Meanwhile, it wasn't 3 years ago. But meanwhile, this works really well. You can switch branches. You can do rebases. You can do squashes. This stuff works great. You just take an hour sometime to read the eGit manual on eclipse.org. And if you like it, you can use this instead of your command line for working with Git. This eGit plugin supports Garrett very well as well, meanwhile. So I fetch my changes and push my Garretts all from this environment. There's no need to use the command line if you just work on code like this. There's even this thing called eGarret, which is an integration of Garrett into the Eclipse IDE. So you can see your pending changes and you can open them. And it's actually pretty cool. You can even comment on code inline in Eclipse with eGarret. So yeah, that's nice. What's slightly confusing is that the basic Garrett support is part of eGit, and this eGarret thing is just a front end for seeing list of changes and stuff like that. Okay. This is a Docker plugin that I threw in there. I'm not sure if anybody's using this, but it's something that Red Hat is building and working on and investing in, which is basically viewing your Docker containers in the IDE. Can be convenient if you have a number of containers and you want to start them and see which ones are running. And you got a UI for that in your Eclipse development environment. 30 seconds or so on the how. If any of you are interested in not just being users of this Eclipse setup model, but contributors, I'd definitely welcome anyone jumping in on this and saying, I don't know, either you're stupid for including this plugin, here's a patch that removes it, or you forgot to include these 3 amazing extra plugins, please include them. what I've done and what this is based on is this OOMPH tool. OOMPH is this Eclipse environment to build custom development environment provisioning models. And the list of projects that comes up in the installer includes one project other than, the classic OpenDaylight project, A and Alto and Controller and Deluxe and Docs. There's an Eclipse setup project in that list. So if you want to work on the setup model, you just check this Eclipse setup project, just like all of the other projects, and you will provision that project in the workspace right next to the OpenDaylight project. It'll basically clone my Git repository from GitHub. And then you get this editor here, which is the editor for the setup model. So what we're looking at here is basically the line that configures the settings XML for the Maven support in Eclipse. That's what makes that work. And I just wanted to show that this is not some secret thing I have on my laptop, but this is an open source project where these setup models are available. And or perhaps if you want to use it in-house or contribute to it, go ahead, send pull requests for this thing. More than welcome to. Okay, moving on. If you have questions about this, just grab me after the session or over in the evening over a drink or something. I'll move on to the second topic, code quality. I have a quiz here to see who is falling asleep in the middle of the afternoon. What do you think these 4 code review comments have in common? And those who saw it at the mini summit in Berlin are not allowed to participate. What are these points? So the first one, I'll read them out. Please change the import statements to be alphabetically ordered and move comments to previous line, and Java util optional is preferred over Guava optional, and the field logger should be called log uppercase. What do these points all have in common? They're code review feedbacks from actual Garretts that I've run into. What do you think? These are all a waste of time. All of these code review comments should never have happened. They're a waste of time of the person who put in this change, who should have known about this long before he raised the change, and they're a waste of time of the person who does the code review. Because real interesting code review is about, I don't know, you could write this in a smarter way, or this could be much more efficient, or this kind of nitty-gritty, nitpicking code review is a shame. It's a waste of time. It's fun sometimes, but we have tools that can do this. My message basically is we have tools that can do this. With correct setup of a tool such as checkstyle and findbugs and sonar, you can see these things while you write your code. The 4 things that I've just shown in the slide before can be found at development time. And the OpenDaylight Eclipse setup environment that I presented in the previous section actually is pre-configured to automatically apply the OpenDaylight checkstyle rules to be active on OpenDaylight projects. So there's this integration that looks in the Maven POM for the checkstyle rules and applies them to each project. And so you have matching configuration of the checkstyle that runs on the build in the Garrett to the development environment, which is really important because I think the way to enforcing common conventions in code is through making sure that developers see this in their face while they code. What we've been doing for a long time to run checkstyle optionally on the build and produce a report when you do your Maven install, that doesn't really work. And I think the fact of how projects in OpenDaylight are today having like 500 checkstyle violations, that doesn't work. Nobody cares about that. What you need to do is you need to put into developers' faces as they code, and with this setup you get that. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to have static code analysis and tools? I think there's 2 main reasons for that. I think the first reason is formatting. Just having shared conventions is a healthy thing for an open source project. You have shared code, you have a community of people working on, and having conventions for common style on that shared code is a good thing. It's easier to work on other people's code if that code is formatted the same. It seems petty. It seems like, who cares how it's indented? It's just formatting. But it makes it easier to share code in a community if it has some conventions for being the same. The other reason is that other than nitty-gritty, there should be a space here and a new line here, these static code analysis tools find real bugs. So there's 2 small examples here. One thing that our checkstyle system does, it says you're not allowed to use system out. And there are reasons for this. It's not that we want to annoy people to say don't put system out. System out has synchronization issues, and system out used wrongly in Karaf commands is a bug because they don't work over an SSH session. So these checks have actually found real bugs. Another example is find bugs, which we're not as far as we should be in terms of adopting it in OpenDaylight, but perhaps one of you is motivated to work on this. If you have any interest in this topic, I'd love to talk to you about this and see how we can move forward on it. Or else maybe I'll find some time one day to contribute something around that. But when I run find bugs manually on OpenDaylight code, you do see real bugs. So this change here, this Garrett referred here, is in OVSDB, a bug that was found thanks to the find bugs UC useless object check. It's one of 200 or so checks that find bugs does. This stuff works. This is based on experience of many, many projects that have used this and have refined these rules. This adds real quality to code. Okay, this I can go over fast because we just said that. It's important to do it in the IDE. This is how it looks like. So in this case, line 32 should have a new line to be separated from line 31, and it shows up here. It's even smart enough, actually, to know whether your project is enforcing check style or is just checking it. So as perhaps some of you know, in OpenDaylight, we have some projects that have switched to enforcing check style and others which are still just using it as warning. And this Eclipse integration is smart enough to either show it as a warning or show it as an error, depending on the configuration of your projects. It also does things, so what you can do here in the case of this violation here, between line 31 and 32, the formatter, Ctrl-Shift-F, and the import ordering, Ctrl-Shift-O, are all pre-configured to do the right thing out of the box. So if you use this Eclipse setup tool, you can just do Ctrl-Shift-O and it'll fix up your import. So you can go to this line here and mark the line, say Ctrl-Shift-F, and it will apply the right formatting. One thing that I want to share with you here is some experiences of how a number of projects have started adopting check style more, and how I would, if you were interested in doing this in your projects, how I would advise you to go about this. This is based on some work that's been happening in NetVert and in MDCell, where somebody has stepped up to do work on cleaning up the check style. If you have an existing project in OpenDaylight, it's hard to just switch it over to be check style clean, the entire repository. What you can do is probably go bundle by bundle. So you have your API, your impl, just do one by one. It's okay, put in a series of changes that says, clean this one up, clean this one up, clean this one up, and sort of gradually go at it. Talk about it in team, your contributors, your mailing lists of your respective project, and say, hey, perhaps we should do this, and who can do which part. And there's probably better times and worse times to do this. Perhaps the end of a release cycle and the start of a new release is maybe a good time right now to do something like this. So if you want to do something like this, what's definitely worthwhile is to switch on the enforcement. So if you want this to have some lasting effect and not just be a one-time effort, clean up one project and then project by project, go into the pom.xml and switch on the violation severity error. This is documented on the wiki. If you go to the wiki.opendaylight.org and search for check style enforcement, this page here, it actually explains what you have to do. This chapter 411 here explains what you have to put in the pom.xml in order to make enforcement. I've also taken some time to document over the last few weeks feedback from reviews we've done, code reviews we've done on check style checks, where people have put in wrong suppress warnings and some explanations on why you need to do things. This one here is about the system out, what you actually need to do to get your system out removed. There's some blah blah here about this kind of stuff in the best practices guide that I encourage you to read. If you have any questions about it, just write to the dev list. Where are we with check style overall? I think we've come a long way in about 6 months or so. So there's a number of projects which have adopted check style. We've also cleaned up some things. We used to have check style rules around different projects. There's a cleanup that's just pending for controller. Netconf has to remove old check style rules that they have, and then we can remove an old check style rule we have in controller. So it's made progress. I think overall we're pretty good. There's a couple of things we could still add. This is a list of additional check style checks which we don't have today, which if we were so adventurous we could add, sort of going over all the things that are available and everything that we have. This is the diff that I found would be potentially worthwhile to go into. Help wanted. Anybody who wants to do this, read this wiki page here, Evolving Check Style, which documents how additional checks could be added to make sure we don't break existing projects, because there's a backward compatibility issue here, right? We can't just go ahead and start enabling more checks because we'll start breaking things. But there are a couple of steps you can do in the right order to fix up existing projects and then tighten the checks. I was a little bit short on time because of the previous session had overrun slightly and the minor problem at the beginning. Let me go real quick over local build and deploy. when you develop, you want to run like this. You want to be real fast and real quick, right? You want your little cars to spin around and jump around. You tried something out, fixed a bug in some bundle. What's the best and the fastest way to get the code from your development environment into your Carafe container? There's two things. One is just the build. So if we forget about how to get into Carafe, just the local build. So this is -pq. Who of you here knows about pq? Raise your hand. 1, 2. None of you have heard of pq? You have to know about this. This is something that went into master about 3 months ago or so. It's an optimization that makes local builds considerably faster. OVSDB runs in, clean installed on OVSDB runs on 7 minutes 41 seconds standard, and with --p, uppercase P, lowercase q, runs in 1 minute. That's a pretty big difference. If you do this a number of times a day, that will make a difference to you. What this does is it skips a number of things. It's not a Maven optimization. It just skips a number of things that you don't really need when you run locally. I'm pretty sure most of you would agree you don't need to build Javadoc when you run locally. That's something we do on the server. Go ahead.
Most times it is slower because it recompiles with YAML files. Does it skip that also?
This does not do anything for YAML files, no.
That you can't skip. You need.
Yeah, there is a...
YAML file is not changed.
Yes, that we had the discussion actually on the list. I think you were in this, no? I think Robert, others chimed in on this on the list. There were some ideas to make a smart thing that discovers if YAML files have been changed and only regenerate them if they haven't. The problem is this is not as trivial because you might have to regenerate YAML files if the dependencies changed. So there was basically pushback on automating this. There is a -d. I think you can do -d skip yang or yang skip, and then the yangs won't be generated. So you can do this locally, but yeah, it's hard to automate this. The idea of this one was a really simple flag that skips everything that is clearly okay to be skipped. Okay, once you have your fast build, your pq build, you do an mvn install, clean install. That pushes your bundle into your local Maven repository. Now you also need to get it into your Carafe. For that, there's another thing. There's -d add install repository path, something which I've contributed a couple of months ago. So what you need to know is that the Carafe environment that you have on your disk to work on your OpenDaylight has its own Maven repositories. There's a system directory in your Carafe environment, and the bundles are read from there and not from your home directory .m2 directory. And if you use this -d add install repository path equal Carafe system, then the bundles that you're building, so you can go cd into your thing that you're fixing your bug on or working on your new feature and do -d add install repository path equals home directory of Carafe /system. It'll copy the jar file into system in the right subdirectory because the system is a local Maven repository. Alexis.
So basically, instead of rebuilding the whole Carafe, you can just do that in the bundle with changing and we don't have to rebuild Carafe. Exactly. This eternal rebuild of Carafe is not required. It's a waste of time. You're just working typically on a bundle and you can just install that bundle into the Carafe you have. That'll save you quite a bit of time. Exactly. That's pretty cool. Thank you for the feedback. This should be quite a bit faster. Yeah. What you have to know is that under a system directory, the jar has to go in the right place. It has to go into the group ID, artifact ID, version ID, and this does the right thing automatically. It reads the POM and does the right thing. It figures out, yeah. It's basically a Maven, it's a Maven, conditional Maven profile that I added that does this, and it does the right thing. Okay, there's even a shortcut in Eclipse. If you want to do it from Eclipse, you can do Shift-Alt-XM, which will run this thing. This does the thing. And once you do that, you have to do dev restart to restart your Carafe. And dev restart is a Carafe console command, yeah. It's a Carafe development environment command that restarts Carafe, unless you're adventurous and try this. But I'd love to talk about this to anybody who wants to look at this perhaps after the session, because that'll be too long for now with the time I have. The previous one is a Carafe reboot. It's like Control-C and restart Carafe, right? And this slide here is about the fact that in OSGI, which has modularity and hot reloading as its main attributes, it should be possible to, in a running Carafe, replace bundles. But there are various reasons why that doesn't work as smoothly as it could and should in OpenDaylight today. Let's talk about that offline with those of you interested in that. And this bundle watch command is what enables Carafe to hot reload bundles. You can try it. You'll find it doesn't work as smooth as it should. You can contribute to making it work perfectly. That'd be very cool. You're not quite there yet. Okay, I do. How are you doing on time? I think I'm slightly over time, but there's nobody here standing like I did in the previous sessions. I'll just keep going until somebody else walks up and claims his spot for the next session. The fourth topic that I wanted to briefly touch upon, and that's the one topic that I'll carry on saying something about in the session tomorrow at 3, is this question about the development work cycle, the development life cycle, sorry. So we've seen that there's a few optimizations that allow you to build your jars faster, and there's a little shortcut that allow you to push your jar files into Carafe, and then you can test your OpenStack and what have you to make sure it works. But is this really how you want to be developing? The sort of question I want to raise here is that when you work on a bug fix, when you work on a new feature, do you want to continuously redeploy and test things live? Depending on your development practice, you're probably all doing test-driven development, right? So what you're really doing is you're writing tests for your Carafe bundles, your network application, which sets up some Yang models and listens to some notifications and then sends out some additional southbound messages. You're not really testing this live in Carafe. You're doing test-driven development. You're writing tests first, and then you're making sure that these tests are green, and then at the end of the day, you'll deploy it to Carafe. I'm joking. Nobody works like this today in OpenDaylight. But we should, because, well, you do, yeah? With integration tests, or with?
No, not integration. I mean, I'm always writing unit. I'm testing on the code.
Yeah, but you don't work.
When I go to actually run it in Carafe, it works because I've already tested.
But you are not writing. Sorry, I don't mean to. But you're working on infrastructure things.
Oh, okay.
Right. So I think the infrastructure kernel projects are very good at this. They have very good test coverage, whether it's Yang tools or whether it's all the great work you do. All of the network function projects, all of the stuff in network, the test coverage is relatively bad. And that is because perhaps we're missing something. I don't think it's just that people don't want to do it. I think there's possibly a piece missing. We have different kinds of tests in OpenDaylight today. On the left, we have our JUnits. JUnits, which in theory are tests for testing individual classes of something. We have our integration tests. So we have this PAX exam thing, which allows you to fire up a Graph container and then run a complete environment and run Java code in that environment. That's relatively heavyweight. And then we have these CSIT tests, of which a colleague of mine from Red Hat has given a presentation, which are black box system tests with Robot Suite. You're out of Java there. My impression from having looked at this a bit more closely and worked with some of my colleagues in Red Hat to say, well, why aren't you writing tests? Perhaps because we're missing a level of test between the JUnits in the middle, on the left, and the integration tests. I'm exploring and have successfully started writing some tests for which I'm lacking a good name. Any input on this would be welcome. I'll say
integration JUnit.
Yeah, integration JUnit. When you
do end-to-end, they
yes,
go
yes.
create a PAX, Carafe container.
I'm hesitant to name them integration tests because integration tests, everybody thinks the existing the ones we have. So sort of end-to-end. You like end-to-end? Yeah, end-to-end. End-to-end API tests, yeah, that's sort of what we're saying. So these are tests that are Java-based, they are JUnit-based, and they test a particular bundle. So you write your network function for ACL servers or for IPv6 or all the good things we do around network and other network functions. And what you really want to test there is if those bundles do the job that they were written to do, that they react to certain events in the data store, that they call out certain other services, but the services that they call out to, you probably want to stub. You really want to test those projects themselves and have these tests run really fast. Here's an example of such a test, which is in network today, in master. You can look at it. There's still some cleanup to do, but this is available today. The ACL service test is an example of this new kind of test, of which we don't have many elsewhere, I think, so far. But if you're interested in this, then look at this and ask questions about it. This test runs the entire ACL service bundle in a JUnit. So this runs in about a second, which is factors faster than what we call an integration test today that you referred to. And it's 3 lines long. It says we have a new interface, and when we bring up a new state interface, we want to be sure that we created flows. And these 3 lines basically give fairly interesting test coverage of an entire project. Because they bring up with dependency injection that entire project, all of the classes in that project. They're not unit tests that test just one class of the project. They bring up all of the classes in that project, configure them, inject them, like wire them together, stub perhaps some of the classes that this project depends on. So in this case, this creates flows, but we don't actually want it to send out events to southbound other projects. So this test IMDSal API manager is a stub that just records the flows that are created so that we can then write an assert for it with this last line here. And this is fast. It's also very easy to debug, which is quite cool. So if you see that in a certain corner case you have a bug, what you want to do is write a test for this corner case. In this way, you can step through, you can debug in a sort of more productive turnaround than you could with the integration tests we have today. One thing that this requires is dependency injection to be easy. And that's what we talk about tomorrow in the session at 3. So in order to write a test like this, you want to bring up a bundle with the wiring as it is in the real carafe, but you want to replace some of the wiring. So you want to bring up whatever classes make up this bundle, wire it together correctly, and have some services replaced by test stubs that you can use in your tests. And there's been some work done to see what perhaps a good way is of doing that. It ties in with the blueprint work, Tom, that you've been doing, and it goes a little further than that. I'm suggesting that by using annotations, these inject annotations, and perhaps combining them with juice for the in-bundle dependencies. You can write wiring that is easy to replace for tests. We'll talk more about that in the session tomorrow. I'll stop here and cover this there. Thanks for your time. I hope this was useful. Ask any questions. Downloaded millions of times. Everybody who uses Eclipse uses this setup tool. And what that does is it's a small couple of 100K installer file. You start that up, and then it says what you want to do with Eclipse. You Java developer, you PHP developer, do you want to write domain-specific languages? Do you want to work on JavaScript? And then you sort of pick your flavor, and then it starts downloading your right plugins and setting everything up. This is standard Eclipse. What we've done for OpenDaylight is we have integrated OpenDaylight into this. So if you go to eclipse.org/download and get the Eclipse standard installer today, you can then click a button and provision all of the OpenDaylight projects into your local workspace directly from eclipse.org, which is pretty cool, actually. So millions of developers who download the Eclipse development environment are actually one click away from contributing to OpenDaylight and a number of other open source projects. They have this catalog of projects that you can choose and provision from. And we got OpenDaylight in there. The way this works, okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining this session on Developer Experience 2.0. I'm going to get a timer running here. And I think we have about 20 minutes or so. The first half of this presentation is a summary of a presentation that has already been given in case somebody has seen this and this looks very familiar. I just want to explain. I'm rerunning something here that was given at the European Mini Summit in June and at the TWS in July. So first half is a summary of that. Second half is new material on based on work since then. In the slides, a couple of things that are marked with this next cube here are work in progress, and everything that does not have that next cube on it is things that are used today in one or the other OpenDaylight project that is ready for you to use as well. Some points are marked with #helpwanted. A couple of things here that we'd be happy for. All right. Eclipse setup, first topic, based on the Oomph Eclipse installer. If you're a new developer who would like to work on the OpenDaylight code base, and you perhaps have some development background, Java experience, or perhaps some more C experience, as is common in some OpenDaylight developers, you might find the setup to get a development environment to contribute to OpenDaylight non-trivial. You have a couple of things you have to do. You need to figure out this Gerrit stuff, and then you have tools that you can run in your workspace to check your code and check style stuff, and then there's certain preferences that you need to set in a certain way. There's always Maven set up, so you need to have this particular settings XML and configure your local Maven. It shouldn't be that hard, right? If you are an occasional contributor, somebody who wants to perhaps fix a bug in something that you found in your use of OpenDaylight, and you say, oh, I'd really like to contribute to this upstream, it should be really easy for you to do that. One of the purposes of an open community is that you should be able to just get started with the code easily. I have given this some thought. This has been a few months ago already, earlier this year, and come up with a solution for this, which is, meanwhile, I think fairly widely used. It's sort of hard with these things sometimes to know exactly who's using it, but based on some feedback I got and just people walking up and saying, I'm actually using this, thanks for doing this, it seems that a number of people have now adopted using this. What I've done is that for the Eclipse integrated development environment, there is a tool called the Eclipse installer, which has become, last summer or so, a year ago, the standard way of distributing Eclipse. So a little earlier, when you went to eclipse.org and downloaded Eclipse and you got a big zip file, that's changed about a year or so ago, a year and a half ago. And now you get a small Eclipse installer, which is a setup tool that's been any of you to jump on and contribute to, if you were so inclined. I'm going to talk fast because I want to cover 4 things in these 25 minutes that we have. First one is Eclipse setup. So introduction to a basically Workspace provisioning tool. Just walk you through what that is and how you can use it. Second topic is about code quality, static code analysis, and a couple of experiences from having done that on a number of projects now. Third topic is on local builds and how to deploy locally and give a few tips around that. And the fourth topic is on end-to-end API tests, going into dependency injection and how to swap services for tests. I won't have time to cover that fourth topic fully, but that will lead into another session that I'm giving tomorrow from 3 to 4 on the fourth topic. So if you're interested in that in particular, we'll touch upon that very briefly at the end and then continue that tomorrow.